maybe a little over a week ago it was, I explained to you guys that YouTube had done a big oopsie poopsie. Am I losing my revenue? What's happening? YouTube changes itself every few years to chase a trend. There are people who basically look at YouTube as a moneymaker, and that's it. Today on DSP News, we have quite a few topics to discuss. But before we get to the big news topics in gaming, I have a hilarious topic to talk about YouTube. In fact, just to confirm, I just want to check something quickly. Okay, so a funny thing happened this morning.
Just by the way that he's described this situation as not only hilarious but also funny, I can almost guarantee you that it's exactly the opposite of that. Because more often than not, when either of those words get brought into question when it comes to DSP, any poor soul who was unfortunate enough to actually have to listen to what he had to say is just left irritated and at their wits' end with the guy.
You may have noticed, or you may have remembered, that about a week ago, maybe a little over a week ago it was, I explained to you guys that YouTube had done a big oopsie poopsie. As they were recoding the site, trying to improve stuff, they accidentally broke everyone's @address links. Meaning, if you wanted to go to a YouTube channel, like my React channel, which is youtube.com/@DSPReacts, if you type that into a web browser, it would give you a 404 error as if the channel had been removed from YouTube, even though it hadn't and was still fully functional.
Of course we remember DSP, how could we possibly forget? You brought it up every single day on the pre-stream while it was still a problem. And of course problem has to be in air quotes because I don't know anybody who is actually putting in the URL of every channel that they go to. Usually people just, I don't know, subscribe and check their feeds. Also, for the love of God, you're 42 years old, DSP, don't ever say oopsie poopsie again. If you're not directly talking to a child, you have no business speaking like that.
This kind of thing literally happens all the time. YouTube is one of the few businesses out there that they don't test anything. I'm just going to repeat that. They literally don't test anything before they launch it. They just launch it and hope for the best. And half the time when they do something and change it, they screw it all up. And then what happens is we're the end user beta testers of their fuck ups. And then we have to figure out what they broke, report it to them, and then they'll fix it after the fact without ever admitting that they did any wrong. Okay?
And would you look at that? Once again, DSP is lying on a company's name. Not that I'm exactly on the YouTube defense force, but to say that they don't ever test out anything before rolling it out publicly on a mass scale is complete lies. They roll out all sorts of changes and features based off of region. The first example that comes to my mind when it comes to them rolling out things on a regional basis is when they were trying to get rid of ad blockers, or still are, I believe. For so long, there was a bunch of people all over the world that were claiming to have no issues, while people in other countries were having all sorts of issues. So really, he just doesn't know what he's talking about, but I guess that's par for the course when you're talking about DSP. But even if we went along with what DSP is saying and just accepted that they don't actually test anything out, they don't roll it out by region, and that they just give it to the public en masse, doesn't he understand that that's kind of the final part of testing anyway, and that inevitably there are going to be bugs and glitches that the end user is going to have to report back to them so that they can fix it? That's the way that every single piece of software seems to be working in the modern day, as well as every video game, something that DSP should be very familiar with. I'm not saying that you have to be exactly pleased with the product. You can absolutely demand better from every company, and please do. But when you use a piece of software or you use a platform that is ever changing, there is bound to be things that you're going to have to deal with that just don't go to plan. But I think going out of your way to do a segment on it during your video game podcast is not exactly the best idea. In fact, probably a huge waste of all of your audience's time.
Well, you might say, well, you know, for like 4 or 5 days, not being able to access a YouTube channel via the ad address isn't that big of a deal. Well, you're actually right, because if you had subscribed to a channel, it still showed up. You still were going to get notifications of the videos. The videos still showed up. Still revenue was still made. The only difference was you couldn't access it from the @link. So some people erroneously actually thought that channels had been like deleted from YouTube when they had it. Okay? So unfortunate that it happened. It took maybe about a week, and then they fixed it. And then I noticed all the links worked again. But everything was kind of broken for about a week, including everyone who used those links for stuff like I did. and they were all broken, but they got, I fixed it basically. Okay.
Apparently, DSP fixed the URL issue. That was pretty robust of him. I had no idea that he had any sort of background in coding or web design at all. So I guess there's a hot new lore drop for you. DSP actually fixed the YouTube problem. Now, if only he could fix his dying channel. But on a real note, I do love that he's finally willing to admit the fact that it wasn't that big of a deal at all, despite talking about it again every single day on his pre-stream, as if the sky was falling, as if the website was going down. It just seems as though every new problem that DSP runs into is some sort of cataclysmic event that he will never recover from, which is made all the more obnoxious by the way that he acts afterwards, oftentimes admitting that he was just exaggerating and in a panic and that there was never actually a real issue.
Okay. So, why am I bringing this up? Because this week, YouTube had another oopsie poopsie. Only this one really had people freaking out, okay? This morning, YouTube decided to recode both their app API as well as the channel API. What does that mean? It means that the data feeds that we as YouTubers get to track statistics, like analytics, like how are my videos doing? How many views did they get? How much engagement? How much money? All of that. They broke it all this morning, okay? But the problem was they fixed part of it right away, but then it took them over 2 hours to fix another part of it. So the API was broken for maybe 10 minutes when it came to views and everything. So everyone's channel showed 0, as if no one had any videos. And they're like, what? Then they fixed that, okay? But guess what they broke? Revenue. So this morning, between the hours of like 8 a.m. to around like 10:45, 11 a.m., okay? If you tried to check your YouTube channel for any kind of revenue data, it basically said that you made $0 or any revenue, if you're pounds, whatever it is, from the days of April 14th until today. All of your data was erased.
This is what we're really complaining about? There was a glitch on a website for a total of 2 hours. And you thought that this was something important enough to bring up on the show today? We're talking about this instead of the game news that you're actually supposed to be talking about, the thing that you planned for? What an absolute waste of time. The way that he talks about YouTube constantly messing up these updates, you'd think that these glitches persisted for longer than 2 hours total. He also talks as though he has any understanding of how the website works in general, when I would be willing to put good money on the fact that he doesn't even know what API stands for, let alone what it does. Which there's no shame in not knowing, but if you're gonna bring it up on a segment like this, if you're gonna be the one to talk about it, then maybe you should look into it and actually understand what you're talking about.
You could click around on every video, they all read as $0. You click on your memberships, 0. Click on ad revenue, 0. It all deleted. So people started to freak out, and you can actually take a look. If you look at the X app,
I just want to remind you, while the DSP said that he doesn't call Twitter the X app and he never will because it's stupid.
for those who don't know, I do have a Twitter account. And yes, I still call it Twitter because X is fucking stupid. And you look at people posting YouTube revenue for like a 2-hour span, people kept tagging, the YouTube creators account, freaking out. Like, what the hell is going on? Am I losing my revenue? What's happening? Like, what the hell? Why would they do that, right?
No, but that is a great question, DSP. Why would people immediately jump to the conclusion that they're losing all of the revenue that they've made on their YouTube channel? Especially given the fact that just the day prior, or even 2 hours before this occurring, the amount of revenue that they were going to be receiving in their YouTube monthly check was very clearly displayed. It just sounds like a whole lot of unnecessary hoopla for what again amounts to 2 hours worth of a YouTube glitch. But if I'm to actually think about this, I would imagine that this is just yet another case of DSP putting words in other people's mouths, or I guess text this time. He absolutely adores acting as though everybody is just as dumb and ignorant as he is. For all we know, the reality is that people were just adding the YouTube support so that they knew what was going on and moving on with their day. But apparently to DSP, everybody was freaking out that they were losing their money, of course.
But then after about 2 hours or so, it started to slowly load. And now, as of this now, it actually works again. So is this a huge deal? No, but just imagine that you're like a YouTuber and like this is the time a week where you do your work or whatever, and oh look, I mean $0 for a whole month. Like, what is going on? Someone like me, yeah, this would affect me huge. Imagine if they screwed up and it wasn't a 2-hour screw up, but a 2-week screw up. Well, I'm supposed to get paid next week. How am I going to pay my bills if I don't get paid by YouTube because they screwed up their API and deleted the revenue data? right?
Well, I would imagine, and please stay with me on this one, that you would just pay your bills with the money that you've already received. At least that would be the case if you actually had any money left over from last month. But the way that you flippantly spend your money and give it all to Scopely, I guess this really would have been a predicament that you would have found yourself in had that been the case. But you would think, as often as DSP is complaining about these websites, as often as he's complaining about every platform he's basically ever produced content on, that he would have some sort of nest egg, that he would have something in his back pocket just in case something goes awry, just in case the detractors get what they were secretly plotting the entire time and he gets deplatformed or something like that. But DSP is incapable of forethought. He only thinks about the here and now. He only lives for today. And today there happens to be a big meaty men festival going on in WWE Champions that he just has to take part in. Obviously, he was #1 and he's got to get back.
So this is a problem. YouTube infamously makes these F-ups and then they try to fix them hurriedly after the fact. There's going to be a day when they're going to break something and they can't fix it right away. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is dumb that they just allow the coders to have free reign of the site and not test anything. How do you let them break all the data on the site? They literally broke every piece of data and then had to hurriedly within 3 hours fix it. It's like, that is so dumb.
He says free reign of the site like the coders are just allowed to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. As if there isn't anybody who's providing any sort of oversight. There's no manager, there's no boss telling these people what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. Nah, they just go and do whatever, whenever, and they just hit update and everybody has to deal with it. Because that's very clearly how a multi-billion-dollar company operates. Or at least that's the picture that Philly is painting for everybody over here. And unfortunately, I'm inclined to believe him just because he operates a super successful business, you guys.
So anyway, is it a huge deal? No, it's not, because they did fix it right away. But it's just another example of YouTube always screwing up this whole site and then having to fix it fast. It's just dumb. And it's like, I feel like at one point they are going to make an error they can't just hurriedly fix and something's going to hit the fan. You know what I'm saying? But for now, at least, it was just kind of a temporary thing. For me, I was eating breakfast. Like, for me, I wasn't freaking out or anything. I was like, so I'm having my bagel and I go to check my videos. I'm like, oh, there's like no data at all on this. Oh, that's good. You know.
And this was the exact moment where I realized that I wanted to talk about this, that I wanted to point this out to people. Because DSP actually took the time out of his pre-stream, out of his podcast, if that's what you want to call it. He actually took the time out of his content to address this YouTube problem that only lasted for 2 hours and didn't even affect him. It was something that he didn't even care about. It didn't bother him. It wasn't something that he ever worried about. But it was still important enough to talk about? For what purpose, DSP? Just so you could talk bad about YouTube yet again? Did we really need another DSP bashing YouTube segment? I mean, don't we have enough of those?
Because I like to check stuff. For example, one thing I'm still checking is part 1 of my Fallout 4 playthrough, which about 3 weeks ago, remember, it hit the YouTube algorithm and it currently has like 32,000 views and is still getting some residual views. I'm owed revenue on that video, but YouTube tried to claim it for music, so I disputed it. Well, it's been 3 weeks, and guess what? YouTube still didn't grant the claim. It's still in the review process, which makes no sense because the criteria of YouTube says 2 weeks, but for some reason they hold it for a month anyway because they don't even abide by their own legal rules. So I'm still waiting on that, and it's like, every day I try to check, hey, did it clear up yet? Hey, did I actually make some money on that video, considering how well it did? And it's nothing. You know, it's like, wow, nothing on that video. I can't make any revenue on it until they clear this up.
He's really concerned about that Fallout 4 video not clearing up, huh? Because this isn't the first time that he's mentioned it. And while that might be the end of this clip, he was only done talking about YouTube for right now. Because it was inevitable that he was going to talk about YouTube again. We just didn't know that it was going to happen so soon and that he was going to have so much to say when he got back to it.
The other topic that I want to talk about before we get to shoutouts today is something that actually came up in the chat earlier today before the podcast had started. All right. I've noticed, as of late, we have a few newcomers to the streams, a few people who have maybe come on by for a little bit, or now either they're newcomers and they're really enjoying the content, or there's people who maybe have previously watched but kind of from the sidelines, but now they're choosing to be more vocal, you know, in the chat and step up and be more of a participating party, which is great.
And before we even really get into this clip, I immediately have to press X to doubt on this one. How many new people are genuinely discovering DSP for the first time? And not only did they discover him for the first time and knew nothing about him previously, but then watched his content and genuinely enjoyed it, and enjoyed it enough that they were willing to talk in his chat with all of these other dents. We'll call them dents. I was going to use a different word, but that's mean. Anytime that he's talking about new people showing up in his chat, I immediately think that it's a LARPer. Because if you actually actually took the time to look at the majority of people in DSP's chat, you can very quickly tell that most of those YouTube channels have been created very recently, which is obviously a huge indication that this is a sock account created entirely for the purpose of LARPing in DSP's chat. So again, anytime that DSP is talking about new people showing up and being confused about this, that, or the other, or not understanding why things are the way that they are, I'm just highly suspicious and skeptical.
And what a lot of people have been saying,
shout out a lot of people, obviously.
Well, not a lot of people, what a few people have been saying is,
okay, I rescind my shout out to a lot of people. Apparently they didn't say it at all.
You know, obviously, hey, I'm a newcomer to your stuff, but I noticed that I can't even go on YouTube and like search for your content because it's all like detractor shit. It's all insulting stuff about you. You know, I can't actually find your content anymore by searching. It seems like if I come to your channel and we sit here and I can find the contents here, but like there's no way to even like use YouTube search or anything to find anything about DSP or DSP gaming or anything like that. But it's weird because you've been around for 16 years. This channel, DSP Gaming, has been around over 14 years. This channel, DSP Gaming, has over 65,000 videos on it. And this channel has, I want to say it's over 400 million views or more than that.
It's really not some big mystery why people can't find DSP Space Gaming when they type in DSP Space Gaming into the YouTube search results. And it's not because there's a space in there that's not necessary. Shut up. It's because everybody talking about DSP, everybody making DSP style detractor content or whatever is just far more relevant than DSP is at this point. And he really has no one to blame for that but himself. He makes bad content that people just don't want to watch. His retention rate is absolutely abysmal, and he said as much on his own pre-stream before. His engagement on every single video is absolutely laughable, very often just getting downvoted into oblivion on every video. It doesn't matter that his channel's been around for 16 years, it doesn't matter that he has like 65,000 videos on the platform. About the only statistic that he mentioned that might actually benefit his channel when it comes to the algorithm is the amount of views that he has. And even that is pretty much made irrelevant because he doesn't get those kind of views anymore. No DSP video is hitting 100,000 views, let alone a million at a time. Like I said, it's not a big question what happened to DSP. He became irrelevant and he continued to make the same bad content that he's always made, and everybody else just happened to move on.
I actually don't know the total views. I would have to look that up. I'm curious where it shows that. I know there's a page that shows that. I just don't know where. But yeah, like this channel has been around for a very long time. Has had millions of people around the world enjoy its content, right? And you might wonder, so how are you where you are today, right? Why is it that your average stream gets like 300 viewers, your average videos get under 1,000 views? You know, it's a simple answer, but to actually elaborate on that, right, you have to look deeper.
But you don't have to go any deeper, DSP. You could just give everybody the simple answer and acknowledge that you don't make content that people actually want to watch. There's no need to waste your audience's time, and there's no need to waste mine either. But of course he's going to, and he's going to cope the entire time and blame everybody but him. I actually haven't seen this entire segment in full yet, but I've seen enough DSP clips at this point that that's just par for the course and to be expected, especially when we're talking about the current state of his channel.
All right, the simple answer is this. YouTube changes itself every few years to chase a trend, okay? And sadly, for people like me who are people who made a career as a content creator slash YouTuber slash video creator, whatever you want to call me on YouTube, either you chase the trends, right? And you follow the trends, and you then ride the trends to popularity, or you don't. If you chase the trends, you have to constantly be changing who you are, reinventing the content you make, and essentially being whatever's popular in the moment. Because at a moment's notice, YouTube can literally have someone go like this. Change the whole site. And now what used to show up in search doesn't. What used to get pushed to the forefront of a related video is gone. And they take a nice big broom and they take everyone else who used to actually get views on YouTube and they just sweep you right under the rug. All right? And then you're gone.
For all my audio style listeners, this is going to be a visual style segment, but can we just take a second to appreciate this absolutely abysmal form when it comes to sweeping coming from the guy? I mean, he couldn't make it any more obvious that he doesn't actually know how to sweep.
They take a nice big broom and they take everyone else who used to actually get views on YouTube and they just sweep you right under the rug. All right? And then you're gone.
But to address the situation that's actually at hand, the topic that he's talking about, yes, DSP, this is how businesses operate. Every business that has the intention of being successful, which should be all of them, is expected to be able to adapt and change as the market sees. And YouTube is no exception to this rule. As the internet landscape has changed, as the customer base of YouTube has changed, the expectations have also changed. And as content creation continues to progress in different forms across the internet, YouTube is absolutely going to try and capitalize on that. It's going to try and use it to its best advantage. And unfortunately, for a lot of the content creators on the platform, that just means that they're going to have to change with it. They're either going to have to try new styles of content or try and figure out how to incorporate the changes that have been made into their current content so that they can continue to do what they want to do. Legitimate businesses thrive when they're adaptable, when they're able to change to what the customer needs them to be. But for a guy who's constantly claiming that this is his business, that this YouTube channel is the thing that he owns and operates and allows him to pay his bills, he's unwilling to change. He's unwilling to adapt to pretty much anything. So it's really no wonder why his channel is as down bad as it is.
And the good news for me is very simple. I've been around for 16 years. I have a knowledge base and a viewer base. People know who DSP is. Now, most people know me for negative reasons, but some people actually know me as a longtime YouTuber who is still here to this day making content daily that I love to make. So I have an installed viewer base that no matter where I go and what I do, people follow me and want to see what I'm up to. I'm very lucky in that regard, because if it weren't for that, I don't know how I would get viewership and make a living. That's the God's honest truth of it. Is YouTube has changed so much in the last 16 years over and over and over that anytime that you try to adjust to the trend, then they change again. And then you, oh, well, I guess I got to change again. I got to change again.
And I do think that that's genuinely kind of sad that even DSP understands that if anybody is genuinely coming to his content to watch it and not make fun of him as a detractor, that they're really only coming around as a novelty because he's somebody who's been around forever. And when it comes to the topic of YouTube favoring different styles of content over others throughout its history, oftentimes the changes really aren't that big, and in my personal experience, for the better. Because the type of changes that DSP was expected to make in order to stay on top of the YouTube game back when he was simple quality improvements. Things like direct capture, things like a dedicated microphone so that you didn't hear the awful echo in his room. They were also very clearly trying to get away from the idea of people mass uploading videos and getting way more views than they deserved and getting paid hand over fist for it. Something that DSP very much has benefited from in the past and hasn't brought up yet, but inevitably will, simply because he always does when this topic is brought up.
I'm one of the people who has very rarely ultimately changed what I do. There was two times, I would say, in my history as a creator that I made giant sweeping changes to the content that I was making, because basically it was either I was going to do it or I was going to be outdated, or it wasn't going to work anymore because of the changes YouTube had made. And we're going to talk about that.
And don't let him get away with this lie. He was absolutely already outdated by the time that he decided to make these changes. There's no he was going to be outdated about it. He already was. But what does it say about DSP and the passion that he has for the content that he creates if he was unwilling to make any sort of improvements until it was deemed absolutely necessary? Because when people have passion for the content they make, they want to make improvements simply because they want to put out a better product. They'll update things like their equipment, their microphones, their cameras, simply because they want to create something that looks good. DSP had no interest in that, and in all honesty, still doesn't. That's why the only improvements that can be made to DSP stream either have to come through the suggestion box, or somebody has to very explicitly mail him something so that it can be used in his setup. And even then, there's no guarantee that he's actually going to use it. Take that Stream Deck that he has as an example. He claims that it's incompatible with his current OS, which to any sane person just means that he needs to upgrade the PC that he's operating off of and get an OS that is compatible with the Stream Deck, because a Stream Deck is a very useful resource to have. But of course, that's too much money for DSP. He's got Hogan's to pull, so that Stream Deck just sits somewhere in the snort for it being completely unused.
But for the most part, if you look at me and the content that I'm making, all right, it's what I want to do. I'm someone who, when I started on YouTube in 2008, which is when I actually started actively posting up raw gameplay clips. And by the way, that's exactly what it was. It was raw gameplay clips. It wasn't playthroughs. It wasn't full Let's Plays. It was just highlights of a game, moments in a game that I thought were interesting. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's YouTube Shorts. It's the montages people make now. That's what I started making on YouTube back in the day. And then within a few months of making that kind of content, I was told, no, we want full playthroughs. So that's what I started doing.
But you absolutely could have done a little bit of both, DSP. And I think that's where a lot of his problems actually stem from. He's either all in or all out, black or white, one extreme to the other. If people really did back in the day communicate with him that they wanted full Let's Plays, that they wanted to see an entire playthrough, he absolutely could have done that. But then he also could have taken those exact same raw uploads that he was putting onto YouTube, compiled them together, edited them even, and made a bunch of highlights that probably would have appealed to an entirely different audience. I just think that DSP realized that uploading the raw videos the way that he did for his full Let's Plays was far easier than actually editing or making a compilation or anything of the sort. And he has that very same mindset even to this day. Because even in the present day, people are constantly telling him, hey, we would love to see this style of content from you. We would love to see you do this. He immediately tells everybody that he's incapable of doing it simply because he's doing these full Let's Plays on streams that nobody wants to watch, because that's the easier thing to do than actually figure out how to edit again. And even when he does cave in and he gives them the style of content that they're actually asking for, things like video game or show reviews, it's unscripted, unedited, and uninformative, and filled with a bunch of dead air. I don't think that I have to tell anybody that that's not how a review is supposed to be, but it's the easiest way that DSP can say that he tried to appease his audience.
Okay? And so, back then, I never, ever, ever intended that anything that I did on YouTube was going to be a way to make a living, anything that was going to get me any kind of popularity or prominence or be known on the internet. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, I'm just going to dick around and make some videos. You know, I was inspired by guys like the Angry Video Game Nerd and the Nostalgia Critic, who basically were guys with zero production budget, but talent. And they just wanted to make funny videos for the internet, and that's what they did, despite the fact that it didn't look great. You could tell there was no budget behind them. There was not giant production teams working on it. It was just kind of silly grassroots style videos that were funny as shit. And inspired by them, I said, I just want to kind of do the same thing, but with games. I want to play new video games and do real commentary on the game as I play it. I don't want to take it super seriously. I want to dick around, and I want to be drinking and doing silly shit. You know what I'm saying? It was never meant to be a situation where I was going to turn it into something professional. It was just supposed to be for fun, a hobby. And it took off. Right? It did back in the day. It took off. People absolutely loved the videos and wanted more. Didn't matter that the visual quality was shit. The audio sounded like it was garbled and being flushed down a toilet. People still enjoyed just kind of hanging out with me and enjoying games for what they are. As silly as that is. All right?
I think that that's really the biggest L that DSP has ever really taken, bigger than cranking one out on stream even. He claims to be the pioneer of this kind of content. He was one of the first people doing Let's Plays, and people wanted to see it so bad that they didn't care about the quality, they didn't care what he was actually saying, they were just hungry for that kind of content. And instead of actually capitalizing on it, instead of actually pushing that genre of content forward and being the best to do it, he just settled for exactly what he was doing. He never strived to be any better. The pioneer of a genre, yet everybody that's in the genre at this point thinks of him as some sort of clown sideshow. And even if you don't believe that he was the first to make this type of content, not even one of the first people, he was definitely doing something at a time when there wasn't that many people to even do it on the platform. So to have that much of a head start on all of these other people and still get absolutely dusted in the race is just an embarrassment. Also, real quick, want to give a shout out to Baldo Baggins in DSP's chat, a very obvious LARPer. But he got a warning for Nightbot that says, please do not use racist, sexist, or harmful terminology here. Thank you. And all his message read was, at DSP Gaming, I miss Panda Lee. Bring her back, dude. I'm not quite sure what was racist, sexist, or harmful in that message, but I agree with every goddamn word that Baldo Baggins said.
So that's how I started. I wasn't someone who went into YouTube with the mentality that I'm going to make it big, I'm going to make a job out of it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And because of that, my passion for games, I feel, comes through. But because of that also, I find myself as a very, very more obstinate and stubborn person when it comes to changing my content for trends.
Then you shouldn't have made this your profession, DSP. You shouldn't have made this your sole income. You should have continued to do it as a passion project, and as the money began to roll in, you should have continued to work your job and do it as a side hustle. Or maybe, and here's just an idea, when you were making money hand over fist that you absolutely didn't deserve, you should have been putting some of it away. So that inevitably, when everything began to change and you were unwilling to, you would have had a nest egg and you could have went and got a legitimate job and been far better off. You made all of your money and popularity off of a trend, but yet you expected that trend to just last forever? Has there ever been a trend that lasted forever, DSP? I genuinely don't know. You're older than me, but I think that the answer is no, and you should have saw that coming. It doesn't take anything more than 2 brain cells kicking around in your skull to let you know that the gravy train isn't going to last forever and that you better do something with it while you have it. And if by chance you did want to remain on that gravy train, then you were going to have to fight tooth and nail every step of the way to make sure that you maintained your popularity and your relevance. The problem was that you made this your entire job and wanted to continue to treat it as if it was some sort of hobby.
I couldn't tell you how many times, oh, YouTube's changing. You've got to do the new thumbnail with your face on it going like that, and you have to have the clickbait titles on all of your videos. And your videos have to be of a certain length and have to look a certain way in order to get traction, right? Oh, you need to ride every trend. So when there's a ice bucket challenge, you've got to be doing it. When there's a new memeable game out that everyone's playing, you've got to play it. If you don't do these key critical things, you're just going to fall by the wayside. People are going to call you a dinosaur. People aren't going to care about you and your content. You've got to ride those waves of popularity. Right now, you've got to be making political content, because right now the election is coming up in the United States. You should absolutely be doing commentary and political content this year. Even if it means you don't do it after the election, you've got to do it now, because that's what's hot right now. Everyone wants to be doing that, right? And I can keep telling you all the, make your videos longer, make your videos shorter. I kid you not. It's changed over the years. Sometimes you're favored if you're longer, sometimes you're favored if you're shorter. Well, what's the fucking rule of thumb here?
Well, YouTube has made it very clear at this point, DSP, that audience retention is the key. So if you can make a longer video that people are going to stick around for, then you should absolutely be doing that. Long form content with good retention is going to take you to the top. There was absolutely a time where a 10-minute video simply so that you could put the ads on it was the move. And I think that that's exactly the reason why they moved to this retention style content. They didn't want everybody uploading 10-minute videos simply so that they could put ads on it. It just led to bad drawn out content that nobody wanted to watch. Videos that should have been 4 minutes turned into 10 just because they wanted to get ad revenue. And while that same situation could be occurring when people try and do these longer form style content pieces, by YouTube focusing on the actual retention rate, you know, how long people actually sat through this long form content, it does kind of negate that happening. But this isn't some sort of YouTube secret. Any content creator worth their salt could tell you that that's the type of content that you should be making if you intend on hitting it in the algorithm. The fact that DSP doesn't know this, or at least pretends not to know this, just goes to show you how much he's actually willing to look into bettering his own situation, because it doesn't take anything more than a Google search to find out that this is the type of content that YouTube is currently looking for.
You got to make YouTube shorts. YouTube shorts are going to propel your channel into the stratosphere, okay? So here's the reality of it. There are people who basically look at YouTube as a moneymaker, and that's it. Maybe they have some passion for the videos they make, or at one point they did, but what ended up happening was they chased a dream that they wanted to make it big on YouTube. And these people turned YouTube into a grind rather than something that there's fun or where their creativity and passion comes through. It's just a grind of content, okay? And the people who have that mentality basically are constantly stressed out because they're always chasing that new algorithm change, that new trend, that new thing that's going to get them some clickbait today so they have something to talk about and they'll actually get popularity on YouTube. I have literally never done that in the 16 years that I've been a content creator.
And I have to disagree with DSP, even though I halfway agree with him, simply because he wanted to use absolute statements like literally and never. Because I can agree for the most part, DSP typically doesn't follow trends. He loves putting out the same stagnant content that's just not appealing to anybody. And that does make up the vast majority of DSP's content, and I think always will. But every once in a while, he gets this harebrained scheme that he's going to try and game the system in some sort of way, that he's actually going to utilize something for once. And then inevitably when he goes goes out of his way to be way late to the party, he does it in the most roundabout, inauthentic ways possible, producing low numbers for DSP, only reinforcing the idea that he's already had it in his mind that he's doing everything correct and nothing wrong. And when it comes to the very idea of a content creator treating it less like a hobby and a passion and more like a job, DSP quite literally is the textbook definition. By his own admission, he has said that he treats it like a 9 to 5, that's the kind of professionalism that he thinks he's bringing to the table. And even if you're unwilling to subscribe to the idea of DSP style professionalism, all you would have to do is take a look at the way that he used to live his life. I mean, he used to be on a non-stop grind of just pumping out these god-awful videos. It was like he was working a double shift and he had kids to feed or something. I know that the process wasn't really that complicated, so it wasn't like he was doing too much work, but still, if you want to talk about a grind, that was really it. Every day, day in, day out for DSP.
So what ended up happening was at the very beginning, it was a hobby that wasn't taken seriously. I got popular. Then I got laid off from my office job. People felt for me, because they basically said, we feel bad for this guy. He's the underdog. He doesn't have any sponsorship or anything. And this guy's now getting laid off from his job, and we like his content. Let's support it.
So according to DSP, even from the inception, his DSP Space gaming channel has essentially been a charity case. And the only reason that it ever seemed to do well was because people thought that he was some sort of underdog and felt bad for him. Now, I personally don't think that that is actually the case. I think people were just looking for a type of content that he provided at a time when not many people were. But if DSP wants to pretend that he's always been a victim in a huge charity case, I guess I'll let him. Why would I give him any more credit than he's asking for? But speaking of giving people credit, this is where I'm going to be ending the clip this time. So hopefully I'll catch all of you guys for the part 2. But before you head into your next video, I want to take a look at some of the comments from my last video. So of course it's big ups to the 60 skulls. Gen276 says, Phil is hard to work with and completely insufferable. That is why no one will sponsor him. And by the way, Atlas agrees. In fact, that's probably where most of his problems actually stem from. Aside from being just bad at video games, he's an insufferable prick that nobody likes. And inevitably, when somebody is on the internet that is completely unlikable, other people are going to go out of their way to make fun of them, to point out all of their flaws, and essentially bully them. It's just the way that the internet has always been and should always be, if you ask me. MacTire419 says, Phil certainly is cut from a different cloth, but not in the way that he thinks he is. And once again, I'm inclined to agree. DSP absolutely is cut from a different cloth. He is a unique style individual. Only if the cloth that he is cut from is an off-spec, forgotten piece of material that was shoved behind a machine for X amount of years before somebody decided to actually do something with it. That cloth is DSP. But that just makes me wonder whether or not that piece of cloth was better off lost and forgotten forever. And Hoskew says, if he never references the bag while pretending to hold a bag again, I'll make a facecam style vid praising his adaptability. The worst. Well, as we've talked about multiple times in this video already, Hoskew, he is absolutely incapable of adapting at all, so I don't think that that's likely going to happen. I do agree with the sentiment though. People definitely need to quit teaching him new words, because every time that he goes to use them, it just feels awkward and forced, and as if he doesn't actually know how to use them to begin with. And then he insists on using it at every junction possible. But speaking of junctions, this is where this video is going to end, and you're probably going to go to a different one. So of course, shout out to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. Hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor content and dive deeper into that. Snortex.